Hi folks, in today's video I am going to be talking a little bit about my experience with Linux Mint Debian Edition 3, codename Cindy. So basically I've been running LMDE, Linux Mint Debian Edition, on my Triton laptop now for a good couple of weeks actually, maybe even the best part of a month. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experiences, so I'm not going to give you a desktop tour or anything like that. In fact, quite frankly, my desktop, as you can see, I'll put up some screenshots just so you get an idea about what my desktop looks like. But LMDE comes with a Cinnamon desktop in the traditional Linux Mint style that we've all come to know and love. So it's, from a visual point of view, and even from the sort of UI standpoint, it's pretty identical to the standard Linux Mint editions that are based on the Ubuntu base. But the purpose here, and I've got the Linux Mint Debian Edition website up here, or webpage specifically on from linuxmint.com, and it says that its main goal is for the Linux Mint team to see how viable our distribution would be and how much work would be necessary if Ubuntu was to ever disappear. LMDE aims to be as similar as possible to Linux Mint, but without using Ubuntu. The package space is provided by Debian instead. There are no point releases in LMDE, so you don't get 3.1 or anything like that like you get with the standard releases. It's all very much when a new version of Debian comes out, it seems that there's a new version of Linux Mint Debian Edition to match. So it says, other than bug fixes and security fixes, Debian-based packages stay the same, but Mint and desktop components are updated continuously. Now, there is a separate repository, so you can see the Debian sort of based repositories in the software sources, and you can also see that Linux Mint have added in their own repositories on top of that. Yeah, basically, when ready, newly developed features get directly into LMDE, whereas they are staged for inclusion on the next upcoming Linux Mint point releases. So it seems here to imply that the latest version of the, say for example, Cinnamon desktop is on the Debian edition, which might possibly be a newer version than you might get on the latest point release of the standard edition, which is quite interesting. Now, the first thing to note about LMDE is that it's only available with the Cinnamon desktop as a download as an ISO, and but it gives you 32-bit and 64-bit versions as well, which is kind of interesting, I think, because there are a limited number of Linux distributions out there that are still supporting 32-bit processors, and to be honest, I wouldn't expect Mint to be one of them. I would have expected them to sort of streamline it by now, but you know, Linux Mint is as Linux Mint does, and to be honest, they've always got a good track record when it comes to satisfying their base. It's one of those distributions that has a very strong community behind it, and that's part of its strength. So it could very well be that there's a significant part of the Linux Mint community that still use or enjoy the use of 32-bit distributions. So yeah, okay. So what's it like day to day to use? To be honest, surprisingly similar to the standard Linux Mint. Like, I think they've done a really good job. I think they're very much on to their sort of, to accomplish their mission, that if Ubuntu were to disappear tomorrow, I think that they would be perfectly able to go to LMDE as their primary distribution. In fact, there's a part of me that thinks that they should kind of do that now. Now, one of the reasons I thought about going for Linux Mint Debian Edition is because I hear that Debian-based distributions on the whole tend to be lighter than Ubuntu-based distributions. Ubuntu put a significant number of layers on top of Debian. They sort of change it quite a lot, and Ubuntu is known for just being a little bit heftier when it comes to system resources than something like Debian. To be honest, I've never done side-by-side comparisons, so I don't know if that's an absolute truth, but I've been running LMDE, and it's been running really quite fine in terms of performance, but probably about every bit as well as standard Linux Mint. I can't actually say that I've noticed too much of a difference. In fact, I think the biggest difference is that the version of Firefox. They have the version 60 ESR version, which is, I think, extended support release, I think it is, or I could possibly be misremembering that initialism, but yeah, like it's a different version of Firefox. I think it's like their LTS equivalent kind of version, like a long-term version of Firefox. And I think I probably would have preferred like the more standard, the more up-to-date version of Firefox that you get with the standard Mint versions and with Ubuntu and that much. But for all intents and purposes, yeah, it runs the same. Now, I've got to say, I don't know if the Cinnamon desktop is the right desktop for this particular laptop. This laptop is an entry-level laptop, and I do notice that specifically when I'm watching streams, that the fans spin up quite a lot. Now, the Triton is quite a noisy laptop when it gets put under a lot of system load at the best of times, so I always try and keep it as light as possible. And I don't think Cinnamon can really be called a lightweight desktop. It's incredibly user-friendly. It hasn't had any bugs whatsoever in any of the times that I've used it in the past couple of years. So it seems to, and it's so intuitive. It seems to be, it has all the features that I need. It looks great. Like, it looks like a very coherent desktop environment in a way that Mate and XFCE and even to a degree KDE Plasma do not. I think you can possibly make an exception for KDE Plasma because, but it seems like there's a lot of a lot of unnecessary stuff that's cut away from the Cinema desktop, and it seems minimalist in that way. Like, I see very few options that get in my way that I don't think I'd never ever need to use. So from that point of view, I think the Cinnamon desktop is a beautifully designed desktop, just uses a few too many system resources for my liking, unfortunately. The theming that actually came with it as well, it included the new Linux Mint theme, but also the old Mint X theme, and I got to say, I did actually kind of put the Mint X theme back on, the older theme, just because I kind of like the old beveled theme. I'm not too big of a fan of flat themes. I can see their visual appeal to a degree, but I don't know, I just kind of felt that the Mintex theme was perfectly fine. I would hope that in the future, when they continue and develop more themes for Linux Mint over time, that they would at least keep their old ones around, because it just gives you a bit of an end-user choice. But I always say this with Linux Mint distributions, is that Linux Mint tends to be the distribution that needs the least amount of altering and customizing out of the box. I can pretty much install one or two applications that I would otherwise need to use, and I would be ready to go. One thing I will say about LMDE is the installation process, while largely the same, is a little bit more involved. I was presented with a partition manager, and I didn't actually assign enough swap space, so I actually ran into occasional few problems when I was live streaming. If those of you that were watching a particular live stream, I think it was my last one where I was playing Hitman 2, you guys might have seen my the Triton Firefox crash a few times, and I actually worked out what was causing that crash. It was because I didn't assign any swap space, and I was running a whole bunch of various different streaming previews to make sure everything was online. So online. So yeah, like I sort of poorly partitioned this, because this computer doesn't exactly have the world of memory. Should have put a bit of swap space in there. I was maybe thinking that I could get by without it. When I pushed it to the limit, it did present a few problems. Now, of course, with Linux Mint is well known for supporting Flatpaks out of the box. This is no exception, although I've got to admit, when it comes to Flatpaks, I tend to just default to the command line, because it's the same on every distribution, so you don't get any kind of confusion. In fact, I think Flatpaks are one of those methods of software distribution or applications or whatever, where the command line is actually more user-friendly than the GUI, because the GUI changes from distribution to distribution. It's usually put into the package manager in some way. It's sort of sewn in, and it's different for every distribution, so you've got to sort of relearn the GUI every single time you switch over to a distribution. With the command line, it's the same on Debian based distributions, on Red Hat based distributions, on everything. So that is pretty wonderful there. So yeah, I've been using a lot of Flatpaks, as I sort of have been doing a lot lately anyway. I find them to be just usable, stable. They do the job well. I think native packages as well probably do the job just as well. I'm just giving Flatpak a bit of a spin here. But yeah, like the Linux Mint Debian Edition supports Flatpaks every bit as well as their main version. And I think with their Flatpaks, that can also make up for the older packages in the Debian base. So if for example Linux Mint Ubuntu Edition, I'm just going to call it Linux Mint Ubuntu Edition at this point now, were to go away tomorrow, it would be absolutely phenomenally cool if Linux Mint developed their own Flatpak repository, and then just had a lot of the Mint applications run out through that. I think that would be really cool. And then Mint applications could just run on any distribution going. So that's really kind of cool as well. Now, here's a bit of a side note when it comes to packages as well. I've actually been trying out Pure VPN, which is a VPN company that actually have a Linux app. They release it as a deb and an RPM package file. I've yet to find a VPN that actually released their client as a Flatpak or an app image or a snap or anything like that. I could be wrong. If I am, please let me know in the description below, of course. They still seem to be packaging them out the old way, and the PureVPN, which is a command line .dev file, which actually works really quite well, actually installed on LMDE pretty nicely as well. So that was pretty good. So if you are a PureVPN user, their Debian app works wonderfully. But in all seriousness, the user interface is every bit as wonderful as Linux Mint. Its usability is every bit as good as Linux Mint. I've got very, 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 very few complaints, and in fact, the biggest one is that it doesn't come with the Mate desktop. I think that is a particularly or XFCE. I could live with the XFCE one. I would actually prefer Mate because it tends to have better support for touchpads in my experience, but. Yeah, like if Linux Mint Debian Edition came out with a Mate desktop, and I know you can install it on top of that as well, but one of the beauty of one of the beautiful things about Linux Mint is the out of the box experience. It's the fact that it is a distribution that I would. If there was someone that was thinking about getting into Linux that I wasn't able to support, maybe they live too far away or whatever, but they were keen enough to actually want to try out Linux Mint would be a direction that I could very well see myself pointing them in, because it has such a great setup out of the box. It's intuitive, not just to Windows converts, but just to anyone. It just feels easy to use, and a lot of the tweaking and stuff has been done for you as well. It's the small touches that really make Linux Mint what it is, as well as the community around it. The support community is absolutely fantastic. So. All in all, an absolutely wonderful experience, and if this computer could handle the Cinnamon desktop, I would be very, very tempted to keep on with it. Part of me thinks that I might be trying Linux MX, possibly, and doing a side-by-side, not quite a side-by-side comparison, but doing a comparison between Linux Mint Debian Edition and MX Linux, because they're both based on Debian, so it'd be interesting to see some of the differences. MX Linux has a bit more of a history behind it, but I've been following some of their social media over on Mastodon, and it's always nice to have a distribution available over on Mastodon. And MX Linux seem to be working really hard on improving the distribution there. So it seems like there are some exciting things afoot in that world. But yeah, going back to LMDE 3, all in all, an absolutely wonderful distribution. Practically zero complaints, other than the fact that it just doesn't come with the Mate desktop. It's intuitive, it looks great, it's user-friendly, very little configuring that you need to do out of the box. And I know very well that I'm repeating myself here, because I guess I don't have too much more to say. I've reviewed Linux Mint-based distributions Linux Mint distributions on this channel countless times, and the reviews tend to remain pretty consistent. It's a wonderful distribution for the use case that it fulfills. So yeah, like I say, if you want to get away from Ubuntu for one reason or another, or if one company sort of ends up buying Canonical and you don't like the idea of using a distribution produced by that company, then yeah, LMDE might be a good alternative path to go down. So anyway, I think that's about it for me today. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know, of course, your thoughts down in the comment section below. And I'm just going to, of course, plug my Twitch channel. I am on Twitch. I'm hoping next year to actually stream quite a lot more. And if you guys are not a fan of Twitch, I have a mirror of that, which is a gaming channel called Gaming with Werewolves. You guys liked punny titles, so I thought I might run with that one. I'll put links to those down in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I've been Chris Ware, and you've been awesome. And so is Linux Mint Debian Edition. I mean, it really is a good distribution.